So just to clarify, if I had swirls on my paint,
Yep.
but then put PPF on top,
Yep.
it would look perfect, but as in it would look great, but I've still got swirls underneath.
Yep. Yeah.
So PPF can hide swirls in the paint?
Yes, it can.
I didn't know that. Hello there, welcome to another video from Max REVS. Here we are with my Voodoo Blue 981 GT4. The car's pretty dirty, but with these lights here, it actually looks pretty great on camera. We're at Huntsmith's, which is a detailing, installing company near Brackley, very close to Silverstone. I've chosen this location to get some work done on my car, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail now. So what I'm looking to do, it's a 2016 car. I purchased the car with PPF on. The hood's got some kind of like battle scars, the bumper's got battle scars, and essentially I want to preserve this car. After driving the 718 GT4 RS, it's convinced me I'm never going to really get an RS given the exclusivity of that product and the cost. This is my forever car. It truly is my forever car, and it is the second best Cayman out there in the world as far as I'm concerned. So I've made that commitment to get some protection done. In this video, we're going to talk about factors you want to consider if you're going to PPF your car. Now, in my particular case, the PPF's been on for about 6.5 years. So there's the issue of taking that PPF off. Why am I doing this? Because PPF doesn't last forever. It does have a kind of shelf life. I'm not really sure what kind of product this is, so we'll kind of go through in a bit more detail. I'm choosing XPEL, that's the kind of manufacturer this kind of detailer is accredited with. So in this video, we'll go over sort of various things that I was not aware of. For example, just going through my car this morning, I've noticed quite a few of the edges are not sort of tucked in. This is a 2016 car, probably the kind of patterns were 2016. Things have moved on. I don't even know what brand is on this car. So we'll kind of go over things that you might want to consider and ask of your installer if they're going to PPF your car, because, you know, I was initially thinking that all installers are pretty much the same, but when you kind of talk to them, they kind of can tweak the manufacturer patterns. They can tuck in around the edges, they can go underneath a bit more. So, you know, just those few little things that offer you a bit more protection, which, you know, we'll cover in this video. So hope you enjoy this video, stick around and enjoy life and cars to the max. Right, so let's go over some of the detail. I'm going to bring Ryan in. Ryan owns Huntsmith's. So how are you doing, Ryan?
I'm very well, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having us here. The lighting is fantastic.
My pleasure.
It even makes my dirty Cayman look great. And I think I've spotted issues on my PPF that I didn't even know I had. So, you know, thank you very much for kind of having us here and kind of hosting us to make this video.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I had a few sort of questions that I thought would be useful to share with the viewers on this channel.
Yeah.
And I guess initially, it was all around the fact that, so the PPF was on this car when I purchased it. Mm-hmm. The dealer that I purchased it actually machined to polish the PPF, which I'd never heard of before, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then obviously it's in my ownership now. So if we could sort of maybe sort of talk around things like, you know, can you sort of machine polish PPF for starters? And then secondly, you know, what do you think is like the life of PPF? So we don't know which brand this is, but it's certainly 6.5 years old.
Yeah.
Would you like leave PPF on a car for like 20 years or, you know, what the thing, because everyone talks about, I'm going to put PPF on.
Yeah.
No one talks about when should I take it off and put it back on again.
It depends on the kind of ownership that it gets. So some people will track their cars, some people will drive them daily, some people will do 500 miles a year. Different films obviously age differently. There are different things that can happen to film, things like they can yellow slightly in the sun, some older films certainly. The glue can fail in some cases, especially in hotter climates. So if you live in a country that's closer to the equator, the film's going to get more heat exposure, and that will shorten the life of a film. They obviously do offer UV protection, but you know, this stuff isn't bulletproof. It does have a shelf life. So it's hard to sort of say, you know, that film's going to last 5 years and that film's going to last 20 years, because it does depend on the kind of usage and how much abuse it gets. You know, different film manufacturers offer different kinds of warranties, which offer different levels of cover for the life of the car. This car in particular, your main concern is, you know, some damage to the front end, which obviously we want to get rid of by replacing the film. There's only so much film that film can take. So really, I think it's quite subjective. It depends on what you're looking at and what you're trying to achieve by replacing the film.
It's interesting you mentioned that too much heat's not good for the product, because I always associated the heat as, you know, activating the self-healing properties, but actually too much heat's not great either.
It's the same as with lacquer. It's obviously going to age I mean, you know, the sun's going to age everything. It's going to age the plastics. It's going to age the lacquer that's on the paintwork. It's going to age the film that's on the car. I'm sure you've seen older films where they go yellow and they crack. and they start to go really nasty and manky. So yes, film has come a long way since those sorts of films, but you know, if you're looking at a car that, you know, if we put XPEL Ultimate Plus on this car today, it would be interesting to see where it is in 20 years, 30 years, if it's still in your ownership.
I'll be buried in this car by the way.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting to see how it ages and see how it does. The sun, you know, is a factor. It's not the biggest factor. Obviously, use is going to be its biggest factor. And a lot of things come into it, like how was the car maintained, what chemicals were used, what kind of protection was put on top of the film, like a ceramic coating, a wax, you know, any of those sorts of things. So it all plays a big part in how that film ages. I can't tell you exactly what film's on this car. It's obviously one of the premium brands because the patterns seem relatively good. The film doesn't look like it's aged that badly, so I'd say it's probably a relatively premium film. When we start removing it, that's when I'll probably start to notice things, whether it's XPEL or Suntech or Premium Shield or one of those brands.
Okay, and you know, one more thing I just would like to, you know, bring in is that, you know, we mentioned that this PPF was polished prior to me buying the car. Would you actually machine polish PPF yourself?
There are polishes that will basically clean the surface, so to remove yellowing, things like that, which it's more of a cleaner polish than something that's going to correct the film, because film doesn't really correct. Okay. Certainly newer films that have a self-healing top coat, it's not really something that you want to be using abrasives on.
Yeah, because I thought you could actually remove some of that.
If you're not careful, you use the wrong kind of polish, the wrong kind of technique, the wrong kind of machine, you could actually hinder the performance of the self-healing top coat. Yeah. So it depends on what kind of machine polish they're looking to do and why they're looking to machine polish it. What is it about the film that you're trying to rectify? If it's swirls and scratches in the self-healing top coat, I'm not so sure that compounding it and polishing it would be the best course of action, because the film obviously heats up differently, it behaves differently to lacquer, and those compounds and polishes that most detailers or body shops would use are designed to work with lacquer, not PPF.
Yeah. I mean, we'll bring you some of these kind of areas in close up a bit later, but there's a few areas where there's kind of like blistering that's appeared on the PPF, and the only thing I can guess is potentially it's been heated up a bit too much while it was machine polished. So cool, so if I can now sort of hand it over to Ryan, let's kind of go through what we've agreed to get done on this car, because it's slightly different in the sense that PPF is coming off. Traditionally, on all the videos I've seen, it's pretty much a new car that's coming into an installer and they're basically starting from scratch to put the PPF on, but this is slightly different because PPF's coming off. So yeah, Ryan, what have I signed myself up for?
So you've obviously come to me because you're unhappy with the damage that you've got on the current PPF. Yeah. There are improvements that can be made with coverage in certain areas on the vehicle. And so what we've discussed is that number one is we need to get this old film off the car. Yeah. So that is a very careful process to carry out, because I'm sure everyone has seen pictures and horror stories and heard of someone that had their paint pulled off the car. Now, yes, there is always the risk of that happening, but the main thing that we need to focus on is taking it off slowly with the right methods. We use steam and heat, which heats up the glue, and it allows us to remove the film gently, because if you don't, the film's quite brittle, it's quite stiff. It's certainly film that's been on the car and bonded to the paintwork for 6 years now. We're going to want to take our time and take it off nicely. The other reason for that as well is the glue that is potentially going to get left behind by removing the film. Sometimes the glue will separate from the actual film and it will stay on the paintwork. So then, you know, the less glue we have left on the paintwork, the better, because it means we then don't have to do glue removal.
So is the glue removal done chemically, or do you have to
chemically
get machine? Okay,
yeah.
It's not machine.
Yeah, so we have to use glue remover. Okay. Any other method would be, you know, too abrasive and too you pick up that glue and put it into a polish or something like that, and it just causes you more problems.
You said that you use steam, because I've seen some videos where they just pour like boiling water, and I've always thought that, you know, that kind of goes everywhere.
I mean, you know, it's boiling water, steam is going to be you know, it's in the same area, and sometimes we will use boiling water. It depends on how we get on with steam. And then, you know, using dry heat can be a bit of a problem because it can get too hot quite quickly, and then it can, you know, the film will just tear as we're pulling it off, and it just becomes quite tedious to do. Steam tends to be, as a rule of thumb, generally the best temperature to do it, and it's also the easiest way of spreading that heat out across. So when I'm steaming, I can keep that, that sort of temperature local. Whereas with a heat gun, if you sort of point it in a different direction for a few seconds too long, you could heat up a spot too much and melt the film, rip it as you're pulling it off. So I generally tend to like to use steam. Most installers will use steam to remove film off of a car. If I held steam on a panel for 30 seconds to a minute, not a great deal is going to change in terms of temperature. Whereas if I hold a heat gun on that panel for 30 seconds to a minute, it's going to keep heating up and heating up and heating up and heating up. And then when you start pulling on the film, you could heat it up too much, the film will tear and it'll just be more difficult to remove the film.
Cool. So just out of interest, are you hoping, ideal, best case, that the film comes off one piece per panel? Because I've seen it where they'll pull off a little bit and then it tears and then they start again.
In an ideal world, we want to get as close to that as possible, but that's just not.
I've never seen it on any videos.
It's just not, to be honest, unless we're taking film off that's been on there for say 6 months, we're just not going to get that lucky. Yeah. The aim is to get as close to that as possible, but it's going to split and tear because there are relief cuts which are going to cause the film to split in certain areas, which is fine. It's just, it's part of the job.
Gotcha. Okay, so you heated it up, you've taken the PPF off, there might be some glue, so you use like a chemical glue remover to get rid of that. And then I'm hoping that the paint is perfect underneath, but if it's not, is that like you do a light correction if necessary?
So I mean, PPF is quite forgiving in that it will hide a lot of defects in paintwork anyway. Generally, it's probably worthwhile giving the car a bit of a machine polish depending on the condition of the paint underneath. If this car, because you don't have the original invoicing and story behind when it was PPF'd, so we don't know if the car was maybe PPF'd at 6 months old or at 6 days old. We don't know yet until we take the film off and we see what's underneath. We don't know. Because PPF is actually pretty good at hiding swirls. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, so we could actually...
I didn't know that.
We could take this film off. It looks great now, no swirls, nice and flat, looks lovely. But we could take that film off and it could be really swirly underneath.
Wow.
So we would make a judgment call at that point at how far you want to go in correcting the paintwork. It's not absolutely necessary. A lot of outfits don't machine polish before putting PPF on. There's no real right or wrong. I'm sure some people will say, like, you have to machine polish before you put the film on. Some people don't bother.
I had no idea that...
I'm not going to say what's right or wrong, but I'm going to say what we're going to do for your particular circumstances. Because during the install, the initial install, the shifting of putting the film on, the squeegeeing, the lifting, the laying it back down, stuff like that will induce a little bit of damage into the paint. Not damage, but, some light surface marring and things like that.
Wow. Well, I had no idea that PPF can actually hide surface swirls. That's a new one for me. Once the PPF's off, so we've got the glue remover to take glue off. Yeah. It's obviously, is it washed? I'm guessing there's nothing there, but would you clay bar it?
What we're probably going to do is we're going to give the car a really good clean first, and then I'm going to remove the film, and I'm probably going to wash it again. And the main reason for that is, some extra dust removal. It's a chance to go around the car a bit closer and a little bit more up in person and do any extra glue removal that we might need to do. So it's probably going to get washed twice anyway, just for my brain, so that I know that it's clean and had everything it needs. Because it's had film on from new, we shouldn't have any contamination really underneath the paintwork, underneath the film, on the paint. But we'll wash it and follow it. It's better to be safe than sorry. So if we do it, and I know that the paintwork is perfect before we put the film, not perfect, but perfectly clean, ready for film, that's better than trying to save an hour or two not cleaning and claying it.
Perfect. Okay, we'll bring you some kind of close-ups of some of these panels. Now, as you can see, if I just take this wing panel here, the PPF kind of stops, kind of short of the edges here. Yep. So, there's an exposed surface there. So are we saying that you'll be able to actually wrap into the edges on most of these places? Okay.
So on this particular install, your edges are on the panel edge rather than inside the return. So there are limits to what you can do with the film. There is only so far you can go with it because it's not like vinyl with vinyl wrapping. That's a much thinner and more pliable product. So you can get away with wrapping over things like these points, these top tips of the corners. There are some areas where we are going to have to leave a an exposed edge somewhere like here potentially, where we'll wrap all the way up to it, and then we'll start the wrap again here, and then we'll have to leave at what we call, it's sort of like a relief cut is the best way to describe it, so that we can then continue the wrap down on inside the door shut.
Okay. And would you say that that's just basically how the patterns have moved on, or has the product moved on? So with XPEL, even going back like 6 years ago, would you say potentially, we don't know what product this is, but would you say that as time has gone on, the wraps now extend into the gaps, whereas maybe 6 years they did?
So the software is always getting better. So XPEL used the DAP. Well, we used XPEL's DAP software, which is called the Design Access Program. So they're always updating that software to allow us to wrap more and have more free reign over what we can make a pattern do. So if we want to take the headlights out and wrap inside here, which we will do, you know, it gives you the ability to add a wrap here, to add a wrap inside these indicators, to add a wrap all the way inside that arch.
Actually, what, wrap the indicators?
Yeah. So obviously,
I didn't even know you were doing that.
The only places that we can't do, so again, it depends on what's practical, because you can get too caught up in trying to hide every single edge and then actually sacrifice a little bit of usability with the film, so that, okay, it looks great, but a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, that trying to wrap too far inside of an edge, or, you know, trying to hide certain things, it's not really practical. So I'd probably start a wrap from here to here, just so it's inside the indicator edge. The more we wrap, the better, because it's less chance of you catching it with a wash mitt, it's less chance of an exposed edge building up dirt over time. But there are limits, so we can't wrap in between two panels, because as you use this car, it vibrates, it rubs, it flexes and moves, and what happens is if you have film wrapped in here and in here, it will chafe.
Oh wow.
Over time. Okay. And then that will prematurely lift, which is not something that we want to do, because then it's also to wrap inside these edges, we've got to take the bumper off. So it's more labour, more time. I
saw some XPEL video on their YouTube channel where they're throwing gravel stones at this panel, and then they took it off, and it was perfect underneath. And that was about 8 years ago. So
it's an extremely durable product. Very, very, very durable, and it will stand up to a lot of punishment. I've seen cars that have had, you know, impact with other vehicles, bollards, you know, stuff like that, where you take the film off and the paint's fine. You have to bear in mind that you're driving this car on compacted rocks. Yeah, so you're driving it around and there's stones everywhere, there's other cars, there's all sorts of stuff going on there, so there's only so much you can do. What we're doing is as much as you can do, as you know, as protection goes, aside from just not using it. You know, you're going to get damage. This is about minimising it.
I was kind of smiling there. I've never heard road surfaces called compacted rocks, but it's quite a good analogy to you know, demonstrate why the rocks do come up. And I'll bring you the close-ups later. Now, I have had puncture wounds, which I think have maybe gone through the PPF, but I'm hoping when the PPF comes off, the paint is still good underneath. But we'll find out that all of wrong. Actually, just one quick thing. You know, I was kind of mentioning that there's an 8mm and a 10mm, but I guess what we're saying potentially is a thicker product, 10mm, won't wrap around or potentially last as long as the 8mm?
Not necessarily that it won't last as long, it's just it's slightly less easy to manipulate the 10mm film because it is slightly thicker. So with an 8mm film, I'm very experienced with the film, so I know what will wrap and what won't wrap. Whereas with a 10mm film, it is a more rigid film, it is thicker, so it doesn't wrap quite as well as the 8mm film naturally by it being a thicker product. So for a road car that you're gonna do road trips, you're gonna go on Sunday drives, Saturday drives, whatever day drives, 8mm film is perfect for this car. 10mm, if you were gonna tell me that I'm gonna do 6 track days a year, I'm gonna go to the ring, you know, I'm gonna do all these sorts of things, then I'd probably recommend that we put 10mm at least on the front. And then maybe 8mm on the rest. But you know, it depends on what's right for you, what's right for the car, you know, what kind of use it's going to get.
If I was a track warrior, 10mm, and it might have to it might maybe come off around these tight edges and you've got to put it back on after 2-3 years. But I think longevity is key for me and protection. So I think we are going 8mm in this particular install anyway, so that's great. And I guess in terms of once the PPF's put on, is there a coating that will go on top of that?
So we'll put a coating on the car. We'll obviously discuss which one you want to go for. But the main thing that a coating is going to give you, whether it's on film or not, is it makes the car easy to clean. it makes it nice and glossy, and it makes your maintenance easier. So the coating will look after the car, you need to look after the coating.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to get out of the coating. It doesn't offer anything in terms of stone chip protection or any kind of impact protection. It will obviously aid and reduce the risk of things like wash marring and swirl marks being induced into the paint, purely by the nature of there will be less, hopefully, should be, in theory, less damaged material on the surface for when you make your contact wash.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I've loved about PPF, like even with the existing PPF, is that you know when you're doing your wash, tar, bugs, I can actually just use my wash mitt and I'll just go over the tar spot with my usual soap, and as long as I get there quickly enough, it will come off. Yep. So I don't have to use any sort of. We do know someone on this channel that's actually used tar remover on PPF, and it didn't work out very well because I think it was quite a harsh product. So are they? We'll talk about that, I guess, when I pick up my car. But do I need to be careful what products I use when it's got the new PPF?
Yeah, always. So the best, there's risks with every kind of product and how you're going to use it. Are you using it in direct sunlight? Are you using it on a car that's got a coating on it? Are you using it on, bad paint work? If there wasn't film on it, is the PPF like an off-brand cheap knockoff version of a decent film? You always want to be a little bit cautious when you're using something like tar remover because it is a solvent. So you want to potentially, I wouldn't just get a new product and just spray it all over the whole side of the car and start using it. I'd probably test a small area first just to make sure that it's not too harsh, because there are tar and glue removers from several different brands, but they're not all the same. So I would check that, I know the product, I've followed the instructions on the bottle, I've tested a small area first, and it's having the desired result. Because there are products out there that can be quite caustic and quite damaging if you aren't using it right, or if it's, certainly some tar removers on things like plastics, they can potentially damage the plastics, the finish on the plastic. So we'll obviously talk about your maintenance. Once we've got the car looking how it should, we'll then go over what I would recommend you follow as a maintenance regime. Yeah. I'll
follow it to the letter, because once this is done, I mean, the whole reason for going through this process is this PPF, is it a 10-year warranty XPEL offer?
XPEL Warranty, the film against yellowing and cracking, glue failure, those sorts of things for 10 years. That applies to factory paintwork. And so the main reason for that is there have been instances where, say, you buy a car that's, let's say, for example, this car was new, and before it was delivered to the customer, or the first owner didn't put film on it immediately, had a smart repair done on the front corner of the car, and then put film on. And if you then had a problem with the film adhering to the paint or the paint adhering to the panel, some people would automatically try to, connect the dots and maybe blame the film.
Well, thank you very much for kind of sharing your time going through the car.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to get my car back. The next video you see on this channel should hopefully be me picking this up and looking absolutely fantastic. Or it could be me driving an RS. I don't think it's going to be driving an RS. Oh my God, that was such an amazing experience. So thanks for your time here, Ryan.
My pleasure.
Part 2 of this video, we'll kind of put the links down in the description with regards to the particular XPEL film I'm using. And yes, stay tuned, stay subscribed, and I'll see you in part 2 of this video. Thanks for your time, Ryan.
My pleasure.
Enjoy life in cars to the max. There you go.